All right. Hey, thanks everybody for coming back. This is Michael, and that is Reggie, who you can't see and you never can see. Well, you could see him in the beginning, but that's neither here nor there. Hey, check it out. Today is another edition of one of my favorite episodes. It is our Ask a Woman episode. And the reason I love these things so much is because we have women on the show. And it's because, admittedly, me and Reggie, we don't really understand women, even though he's married and I've been dating forever. Still, we find ourselves at our wits' end just trying to figure this thing out. And today we have Kimberly on the show. And for the purposes of this particular episode, she represents all women. How's it going, Kimberly?
It's going awesome. Yes, I represent all women today. I like that power.
That's right. No pressure, but whatever you say is what we're applying, and it'll be held
Perfect.
against you.
I'll do my best.
Okay. So sit back for a second, Kimberly. Let me say some great things about you. Let me big you up.
All right.
Kimberly's not just here to tell us how stupid we are. She is actually a dating and relationship coach. And when I say dating and relationship coach, I'm not talking about you and your homeboys or you and your homegirls sitting around a table with drinks in your hand, complaining about what your man or what your woman did. No, she actually does this for business and she's actually good at it. And she gives advice to men. And I'll come back to that whole man part of it. And if you go to her site, KimberlyNinaHill.com, you'll see what types of packages that she offers, um, in particular for men who might need a little help or a lot of help in dealing with women. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kimberly, but you just had an ebook that you published, right? Dating Women with Confidence.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, it's got a bunch of secrets in there for men, and often a few mistakes in there that men make, and how to overcome them.
Just a few mistakes, huh?
Yeah, five major ones.
Okay. And they can get that at your website as well, right?
They can find it on the website. There'll be a pop-up when they open up KimberlyNinaHill.com, and I'll give you the direct link as well that they can find in this podcast description. I'm sure.
Cool. And all of that, yeah, will be in the show notes because it's
Mhm.
amazing to me, Kimberly, after all of these years of dating and men in general, how, there are still women out there that just make us nervous and we're tripping
Oh,
all over ourselves, acting uncharacteristic for some of us, characteristic for others of us. So, yeah, even at this stage of my life, hey, if there's any help that I can get, hey, I'm all for it. That's part of the reason that you're on the show.
awesome. Don't get us wrong. Women also are very bad at dating. We make a lot of mistakes, and we also get very nervous too.
Yeah,
You're not alone.
but you all are a lot cooler though in covering it up than us. We just look like dorks.
Fair enough, but being dorky can be quite cute sometimes.
Okay, okay, we'll just go with that.
We're gonna go with that. That was my man when we first met. I actually have a podcast where we talk about first impressions and how, like, the first time I saw him, my immediate, like, microsecond thought was, what a dork. He was like,
Wow.
he was rushing. He was a little, like, a couple minutes late. He had a book bag, which he goes on to explain in the podcast is, he carries his art supplies in there. He's an artist. But my impression was like, what a dork. Of course, his first impression of me, I'm not just going to throw him under the bus, was, I feel like I'm on a business meeting going on a date with you. I was like, oh, it's awful.
Okay, so I can't let that pass. I'm sorry, Kimberly. So, so, um, are you just in general attracted to the more dorky, geeky type of dude, or was it just something about him that just resonated despite his dorkiness?
Totally, something about him that resonated despite the dorkiness. What I came to realize was that our first impressions of people are not normally the right ones, and as I
True.
got to know Andrew better and better, I realized that, well, one, I'm actually really dorky as well, so it kind of gelled quite well. And
Okay.
two, there's so much more to him than the first outfit I saw him wearing, or the assumption I have what was in his book bag, right? So I guess the moral of the story there is, give someone time to show their true selves.
Right. The whole don't judge a book by its cover and all of that good
Totally.
stuff.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Well, it's funny because you alluded to the podcast, but let me talk a little bit more about the podcast because I do have some questions about that as well.
Sure.
Kimberly is the host of the Self Confidence Project podcast or Project. as Kimberly pronounces it. Kimberly's Canadian, and when I listen to it, it's always funny when that Canadian accent comes out every now and then. But
That's fine.
yeah. So whether it's tomato, project, the point of the whole thing is that the podcast is good. So you all should go look at it, listen to it rather.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, hey, I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. Speaking of your podcast, I was
Mm-hmm.
listening to the most recent episode.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and for
I
people that
know.
don't,
We went there. We went there.
yeah, the most recent episode was about masturbation, ladies and
Yes, it
gentlemen.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and heads up to all of you all listening. She's not afraid to go any and everywhere when it comes to this dating and relationship stuff, which
Yeah.
of course we respect around here. But
Mm-hmm.
I will say though, when I saw the title, to be honest, Kimberly, just you and I
Yeah.
talking right now, when I even see or hear the word masturbate, my first impression is just like the giggle, like I'm 10 years old all over again. But
Most people's is, yeah.
yeah,
Including mine. Let's be real. Like I'm not gonna deny it. It's a funny subject.
yeah, but you all went deep with it. That was heavy.
Yeah. Well, that's like thanks to Devin for totally bearing it all with
Mhm.
his story and the truth of like how it actually impacts us in our relationships. And I knew he'd be the right guy to have on. Um, so I know that it's going to be a really helpful episode for a lot of people.
Yeah, that was impressive. Another thing that I got from that episode, of course, bringing it back to the lighter
Mhm.
side, which is where I live. One of the statistics that Devin gave was that I think it was like 98% of men in the UK masturbate,
Yeah.
92% of American men masturbate. And so my question, and this is for you, Kimberly,
Mhm.
what are the other 8% doing? Remember, you represent all women right now.
I don't know what they're doing. They're not having much fun, I guess. Honestly, I would imagine that the 8% doesn't understand it, is too far deep in a belief to not understand their own body or something. But I don't know.
Yeah, sucks for
Yeah,
them. Um,
sucks for them.
yeah,
Don't be in the 8%, folks.
right. Do better because Kimberly was pointing out that it helps you with prevent colon cancer and it helps you see better and you grow 6 feet taller. Obviously, I added those
Totally.
last two in, but yeah,
No, it's hugely beneficial for us for stress relief, but there's a fine line with anything in life. Do it to explore yourself, get to know your body better, but where it becomes a problem is where it's interfering in your relationship. If you're hiding it from your partner, if you're addicted to porn, if it's something that's happening compulsively, if it's not a pleasurable thing but rather a have to do thing, you need to then check yourself a little bit. Yeah.
that was the other part. And this is the last thing I'll say before I move on is that it was interesting detangling the whole porn from masturbation part of it. I think that came on toward the end of
Yeah.
the episode. That was
Yeah.
fascinating. So
Yeah, it's
obviously,
hard not to talk about porn when we talk about it. And I wanted to try and keep the episode more about masturbation itself, but we had to touch it at the end for sure. Yeah.
yeah, obviously, if you couldn't tell, I got a lot from that episode.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah,
The audio was a little rough because Devin just moved to Toronto. He had a funny little setup there, but I'm glad you're able to listen and learn from it. Yeah.
yeah, it worked out. And just to stay on the podcast for a couple more secs,
Mhm.
one of the things that I noticed also is that you seem to have had some pretty good successes, more than anyone else that I would know from Tinder. Am I right or wrong about that?
Right. Yeah. I spoke about my experience there. I
Yeah,
don't know. The thing is that misery loves company, right? So most people are going to talk about their bad experiences. And that's what's going to kind of get filtered around,
right,
right?
right.
So, people that meet on Tinder have a good experience, end up meeting, dating, and falling in love. They're not really going to talk about Tinder a whole lot. They're just going to move on in their lives. But
Right.
those of us that are using it and struggling with it let it be known, right?
I tell you what, I was impressed. Also, and it's not just Tinder, it's just social media.
Mhm.
You and your family just lead some kind of charmed life that the rest of us can't relate to because you mentioned that your sister met her husband on POF. How the fuck does that happen?
Well, hold on. Melanie, my sister who's over in Ontario, she met her first husband online. Okay.
Oh,
I may have left that
okay.
slight detail.
Okay. Okay. And that does make a difference.
It makes a big difference. Yes. The second one, how did she meet her current partner? I can't quite remember. It may have been online as well, but
Okay.
maybe not. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That makes me feel at the expense of your sister, who I'm sure is a great, beautiful woman, does make me feel a little bit better. I'm like, man,
Oh,
she
yeah.
met her husband on POF. I was on POF and all us, never mind. POF is a great site. Yep. I have nothing bad to say about POF. It's great. And I'll just leave people with this. If you want to hear a good story when listening to her podcast, she tells a story about a guy that she met who was on Tinder when she was in Singapore, of all people. And they wound up dating for 2 years.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was my former relationship, Tom. I was living in Australia. He was living in Singapore. I flew up to Singapore for a business trip, and I didn't realize at the time that Tinder would just update your location. So he was flipping through Tinder and saw my profile, and I was of course mortified because I worked in finance at the time. I was like the only female in this office in Singapore. So like all the dudes that were looking saw me on there, and it was as if I came up to be like, hey, I'm here to date. But of course that wasn't the purpose. But I never saw him on the app. Okay. He saw me. And then we ended up conveniently being in the elevator together. And even though he had seen me on Tinder, he never said anything to me. He didn't even speak. He had no line, nothing. So I just turned to him and I said, how's it going? How's your day? And he's like, oh, it's good. I'm like, are you going to get lunch? He's like, yeah, I'm going to get lunch. And I'm in my running gear. He's like, are you going for a run? I'm like, yeah, you guessed it. And literally that was that.
Look at you being all assertive. That's impressive.
Well, we had 27 floors. It was going to be way more awkward to just stand there in silence.
Right. It's a long elevator ride down.
Totally. Just say hello. It's okay. You can just say hi. Hi.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Yeah, that works. Okay. And there's only one more thing that I want to ask you about before I ask you questions specifically about your dating and coaching business. In one of the episodes, it's like, I feel like I'm like podcast stalking you because I listen to so many of these episodes. But
awesome.
Okay, let's talk about ghosting for a second.
Oh, yeah. Ooh.
Okay. I think it's universally agreed upon that ghosting is a bad thing. I don't think there's any debate there, right?
Yeah, I think so. It sucks to be on the receiving end of it.
Right. And when I was listening to that particular episode, one of the things that I was wondering though is two things actually. One is, at what point are you obligated to tell someone that you're not interested in them? So let's say you meet someone online, you ask them for their phone number, you get their phone number, you have one conversation that lasts for, let's say, 25 minutes. You realize that this person isn't compatible with you. Are you obligated to call them back or text them back and tell them you won't be getting another phone call from me? Or is it okay at that point to just fade off into oblivion, or oblivion is what Tyson used to say?
I don't think it's an obligation. I think it's a nice thing to do. So you could just say nothing, and that person is eventually going to work it out. When they send another message or they wait around and don't hear from you, they're going to get the message. It's pretty loud and clear. But I think it's a nice thing to say, hey, I've really enjoyed our chat, but I don't wish to take things further. It literally took me, a second, 2 seconds to say that. Equally, it would take you 10 seconds to type it out, and you don't have to stress about it. You don't have to respond after that. You've said your point, right?
Okay, I respect that. Which brings me to the second point. Not really a question, just a point in general. It's funny because this was years ago, thankfully. So I've had time to kind of like build my confidence back up.
Yeah.
And I'm just joking about that. Every man should be used to rejection in one form or another. But it was funny because I went out with a woman. I don't even know if we went out. Actually, we had a phone call. And when I called her a second time, She didn't answer the phone. She sent me a text saying the infamous, "You're a great guy,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but we're not compatible." And honestly, Kimberly, my first thought was, shit, I think ghosting might have been better than this.
Okay, yeah, maybe. Although then you would have been left to make up your own mind or, use your own imagination. But yeah, no, it's rejection in any form. Like it sucks. There's no two ways about it. Like being rejected is a shitty thing. Pardon my French.
I've already cursed like 5 times.
Okay, good. Okay. It fucking sucks. But the more we get rejected, the less we kind of worry about it, to be honest. And I don't know. I would argue that maybe it's nice to just have like the band-aid ripped off than to kind of worry about it for a week if you're the worrying type.
Yeah. And the only reason I was just like comparing the two, ghosting versus being told that we're not compatible, was because I don't really know that you get the answer that you might be looking for either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, she's not going to tell you because I just didn't like your voice or you said something stupid. And
Well, you don't have to say incompatible, right? I mean, you don't really know enough about a person to say you're incompatible with them. It just could be like, I don't know. I'm all for honesty, right? Hey,
mhm.
I've enjoyed our conversation. I don't want to take it further. You don't really owe them an explanation. When you try and find an explanation, like there was a guy I went on a date with and he took his front teeth out before meeting. Like, I didn't need to be like, hey, by the way, I don't want to go on another date with you because you took your teeth out in front of me and it kind of weirded me out and I just can't really get the desire thing going here. So I just told him, hey, thanks very much for meeting me. I enjoyed our time. I don't wish to take it further. Digging for the explanations is hard. It's hard to be tactful and direct and honest, and not hurt someone's feelings. So just kind of tell them you're moving on. Don't feel the need to give a huge explanation. I don't.
I, I have to say, Kimberly, when I listen to your podcast or when we talk, you say things from time to time that literally would make me spit my water out if I was drinking water. To think, but I respect the guy
Thank
who
you.
felt the confidence in himself that he could sit there and pop his teeth out. That's
Totally.
yeah, yeah.
Like, can I pass you straw or?
But hey, going back to what you said earlier about your man now, hey, you can't judge a book by its cover. Hey,
No, totally, right? And maybe had I actually given that guy another couple of chances, right? The truth is, I might have realized that's a temporary thing. We might have talked a little bit more about it. I could have laughed. I mean, I would have shared the story about how I had my front tooth knocked out. Maybe we would have bonded over it. But at the time, I was also speaking with Andrew. And the truth is, I was more interested in Andrew. So I went down that road.
first of all, for some reason, it doesn't surprise me that you have a story about your tooth being knocked out. It just seems like you have a story for everything.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I'm joking about that because one is funny, but to me, it's not so much about him missing teeth. It's just that that's not kind of the thing that you would do in front of someone that you're trying to impress.
You would think, but I also totally respect that, like, that's where he was at and that's something he was going through. And he was just super honest with it. Honestly, it threw me off, but maybe for the right girl, it wouldn't.
You're so nice. You're so nice.
It wasn't the only red flag I picked up at the time. Let's be honest. So,
I would think that most people would say that's enough, but
yeah.
okay. Hey, if you were looking for like red flags 4 or 5, thank God for Andrew is the point in all
Michael,
of this.
I'm in my, we don't need to know my age, but I'm old enough to not have baby teeth, but I do. I still have two baby teeth in the front of my mouth. There's not enough. If they were to fall, it's hard. I could totally show you, but that would be so awkward. I have them both. If they were to fall out, there's not enough space for my like eye teeth to come down. So I've always been recommended by dentists to get braces, and I've always told them to take a hike because I just don't want to get them in my adult life. So, and my little babies are hanging in there. So we've all got problems.
Stop.
Mhm.
This is so far off the path, but that's all right though. Okay, so is it like they're sitting behind like your
Oh,
other teeth?
they're like I'm smiling.
Uh-huh.
And these little guys are my babies. And above them, up in my gums, are my eye teeth. They're still in there. They're like, they've been in there since I first got them when I was a couple years old.
Wow, it's like they're impacted wisdom teeth, but toward the front of your mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just got these little guys. And it honestly, it makes me shy. Sometimes I smile and I feel like it's not a full-size tooth. But then I'm like, you know what? My partner thinks I'm adorable. And so I'll just roll with it.
Hey, which is all that matters in the grand scheme of things. I tell you what, just from this 20 minutes so far, one thing I will say, I cannot wait to read your book on your life.
Thank you. I
All
don't
right.
find myself that interesting, but I'm glad that you do.
Uh, you should be one of the ones listening to the stories.
Mhm.
But okay, so I mentioned in the beginning that you are a dating and relationship coach, and we've talked about your teeth and about the man with no teeth and about the podcast and everything else. Now I have some specific questions
Okay.
about you in that realm because that is relative news to me. I have to say, Kimberly, I'm a little disappointed in you. Actually, I'm a lot disappointed in you
Mm.
because when we were talking before this show, one of my references for a dating coach or relationship coach was the movie Hitch with Will Smith.
Oh, I
And you
know.
said you hadn't seen the movie.
Yeah.
Explain yourself. What were you doing? Why didn't you see the
I don't
movie?
know. Maybe I'll watch it tonight, actually.
You should.
So, and then we can talk about it again in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
why don't, would you want to give me like the gist of what happens in it? I've also watched movies, forgot I've watched them, and then been reminded, been like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Just,
Well, yeah. Well, I would imagine since this one is so like closely related to your actual profession that if you had seen it, you would have remembered it. But basically,
okay.
Will Smith was played a character that was known as the date doctor, and he coached men. Um,
What?
yeah, um, how to just navigate through relationships up from the point of seeing a woman and how to speak to her, how to make that initial contact to, and he went as far as to like, okay, this is what you do when you're preparing for your first kiss. This is
Hmm.
what you do when you're first preparing for sex and all that stuff. And then it got all sappy and stuff because he fell in love with Eva Mendes and,
Oh
it just went
goodness.
downhill from there.
Good. Okay. Well, it's on the list. And you know what? Bad on me for not watching it before chatting with you.
Okay, shame on you. I'll forgive you. But yeah, when you do watch that, you make sure you text me and let me know.
Okay, well.
Okay, so how did you get into this? How does one become a dating and relationship coach specifically for men?
Well, there is no real answer to that. It is not like we go to school to learn this specific skill. In fact, this is a skill we're not taught at all. So the way I landed here was a very wavy, unpredictable, random series of events that led me to choose to do this for men and choose to do it in this space. And the truth is, I never planned to do this. In fact, it's an area that I wasn't very good at. And I ended up leaving Vancouver, Canada to go on a backpacking trip to Southeast Asia with a girlfriend. We bought a one-way ticket to Bangkok, Thailand. I was doing a university degree in business at the time. I thought we were just going to travel for the summer. Turns out I was away from home for 10 years. I ended up falling into a career in financial derivatives, working with men primarily. It's probably over 90% male dominated industry. I worked with a bunch of Aussie blokes in Sydney and down under for about 6 years, and then continued on to Singapore for a few years. So I'd say eight or so years I worked in a completely unrelated field to what I do now. But at the time, I was going from relationship to relationship. I didn't have a Scooby-Doo what I was doing when it came to dating. And I also was able to kind of witness the struggle that men were going through that had like high powered careers, but also trying to balance their relationships or trying to get out and date again and do that in that culture. And, I ended up being the kind of person that a lot of these guys would just open up to and share with. It's just part of my personality is like people do feel safe confiding in me. And I still didn't really realize that it was something I wanted to do. It all kind of came to a head when I started speaking to a coach myself. It was more of a life coach, someone helping guide me towards my own strengths and helping me overcome and find solutions to the problems I was dealing with, which normally centered around dating and relationships. It's like the topic that we often need the most support with. but we don't really kind of admit that to ourselves. We don't get taught how to look for a compatible partner. We don't get taught how to reduce conflict in our relationships. We're not really taught how to, ease into intimacy in a way that feels good for us. Like we just kind of learn as we go. So when I was living in Singapore, I made the decision that I was going to leave my corporate job to become a coach. I just knew at the time I wanted to support other people. I didn't know how, I didn't know what it was going to look like. I just believed enough in myself that I would figure it out. So I left that job. In fact, the relationship ended. I flew back to Vancouver. I went and got qualified as a solutions focused coach with the idea that I was actually going to help people with their confidence. And through working with some clients in the early days around life, I started to see a theme emerge. What was happening was that they weren't feeling satisfied in their relationships, or their dating experiences weren't the way they wanted them to be. And that seemed to be the central theme of what I was supporting people with. So I said, well, I better go figure this out myself. So I've studied a lot since then. I've gone to the Gottman Institute and studied their program on relationship. I've learned a lot about conflict. And of course, most of my material I've learned through the men that I've coached. I've tried things on in my own dating experiences and my own relationships. And the truth is, most of it comes down to our attitudes and our mindset and our beliefs around these topics. So through working with many coaches myself, they helped me to recognize what I'm really good at. And what I'm actually good at is connecting with men and supporting men and making them feel like someone is hearing them and listening to them and understands their problems, but can also help them from the female perspective. So that's kind of how I ended up here. It's a bit random.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I interpret that all as, men were just the most pathetic, the more pathetic, and needed the most help. So you being the giver that you are, you decide to step up and help us. Right?
Sure.
Just go with it.
I'm going with it.
Okay.
Men definitely need help. There's not enough women out there in like the men's corner saying like, you guys can do it. You're awesome. Like I used to be one of those women that was super critical of my partners. And like, I felt like they couldn't do anything right. And this attitude I had about what I thought a man should look like and what they should do for me in a relationship was so incorrect that it caused my relationships to not feel good, or they like were good in the beginning when everyone was doing everything for one another, and then when like love and consistency came in, it's like I didn't know how to maintain that, and neither did they. So I wanted to teach myself and support people along the way. So yes, men are struggling.
Okay. So knowing how, for lack of a better word, stupid guys can be, and it's partially because of our egos. And even if we lack some confidence in one area, that area being in how to meet and interact with women, that doesn't necessarily always apply in every other area. So
that's true. Yeah.
right. So when you have a client and you're coaching them, do you find many times when their egos get in the way, and it's kind of like, even though you're giving them advice about women, which you are one of, do you still find that they're pushing back on you and the advice that you're giving?
No, maybe interestingly, no. And possibly because of the way I coach. I don't typically work with men and just tell them what to do. I mean, that would probably be a lot of fun, but I don't find that to be a very effective way of coaching men. I often get to the root of what's going on. I'm there to offer a perspective to help them break down limited beliefs and to give them that encouragement, education, and guidance. But I don't find myself saying you should do this or you shouldn't do this. It's much more tell me what's really going on in your life right now. Where are you satisfied? Where are you not satisfied? Tell me why you're not feeling satisfied. Okay, now let's together come up with an action plan on how you can overcome that. And yeah, sure, there'll be some advice in there. There'll be some guidance. That's much more of a partnership, I'd say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a gross generalization when I ask the question, but you'll get what I mean. So there's always this yin and yang. It's kind of like, which is harder, to make a lazy person work hard, or is it easier to rein in someone who's doing too much? So going back to the ego thing, is it
Mhm.
easier to work with someone who has a big ego and you can just kind of like rein them in, or is it someone with low self-esteem and you're just pushing them and it's hard to get them to kind of just go?
I think it's hard both ways. It's a challenge when we're trying to change anybody's behavior or beliefs. I would say that the typical man that I work with has gotten to a point where their self esteem around dating and relationships is pretty low. So
Mm.
maybe they started off thinking, I get the girls, I'm kind of good in all these areas. And then they realize a couple years into a relationship that doesn't seem to be working so well for them. And they're trying to figure out why that is. I would say that the typical man I work with would also consider themselves a nice guy or a people pleaser. And so there's a lots of challenges in getting them to change their beliefs around how they interact with women, what they believe about themselves as well, and also like learning how to be assertive and to say no, which is something that is hard for a lot of people to do. A lot of guys that I work with say, like, I've been trying everything, I think I'm doing the right things, I'm trying to please women, I'm trying to please my wife or my girlfriend. She just says like it's not what she's really wanting. The truth is there's a huge communication issue happening there. So yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, Kimberly, this one is just between you and I. Nobody else is listening.
Sure.
Nothing. Andrew, he's off doing his Andrew thing. Um, okay, I preface it by saying that you are an
Mm,
attractive woman.
thank
Again,
you.
no disrespect to Andrew. So that leads to my question. With your clients, you being
Mhm.
attractive, them having whatever issues they have, surely how many of these guys have hit on you and said, hey, Kimberly, how about you and I, you know?
None.
Really?
Nobody has ever, a client, someone that I am like signed on with and working with, no one has ever been inappropriate or asked me out.
Hmm.
Um, Men that I talked to before becoming a client, different story. I get all sorts of random messages on social media and often very inappropriate things. And that's when people get ghosted by me. I call it lesson block. I don't even respond and they just get deleted and blocked. It's like you
Okay.
don't even exist in my like universe. But no, thank goodness I've never had a client cross a boundary for me. And often that's because we're talking about boundaries. And yeah,
Okay.
so
Okay.
lucky for me, I
Yeah,
guess.
not quite the answer I was looking for, but hey,
Mhm.
oh well.
I know, sorry, it's not that fun.
That's all right. You told us enough good stories that we're good. We're good. Okay, so you're a dating and relationship coach, which means some of these guys are in relationships. And my question to that is, how do their girlfriends, wives, or what do you want to call it, do they ever have any issue with you? Do they think it's strange that they're meeting with a date coach or female dating coach? Or how did have you ever encountered any issues with that?
No, I haven't. I'd say the bulk of the men I work with are single, looking to get in relationships or just newly dating. I do work with a lot of men in relationships too. Some of them do speak to me in confidence.
Mhm.
And so just like getting counseling or therapy, it's like you don't have to necessarily say tonight's my counseling session. It's like it's something they're doing for themselves. And I'm not there to tell them leave your relationship or stay in it. I'm there and I support the types of men that are wanting to build their relationships and their intimacy. So I haven't had any issues. And if I do, I have had like a couple rare occasions where like the partner wants to come and meet me on the consultation, and I have no issue with that. Like, come get to know me, judge for yourself. If you feel comfortable, let's move forward. If you don't, probably not going to do well working with that person in the first place. So yeah. Yeah, I've had a couple like men want to recommend their partners to speak to me.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't think about that, but that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I have a long-standing client who goes like, I really want you to like talk to my wife too, because I think that that would be really helpful. Um, it's got me thinking about, should I do couples kind of count or coaching, but
Yeah.
maybe
I
not.
Yeah, I
You
get
know?
that because I can imagine guys being vulnerable to you in ways that they might not necessarily feel comfortable with their wives or girlfriends or something like that. So you might have some
Yeah,
insight that it would be easier having
yeah.
you relate to their spouses as opposed to them saying it.
It might be. For me, I think it would be like, personally, I would find it an ethical violation to talk to one person and have them like tell me about their issues and then talk to another person and try and
Mm,
remember that was in confidence and what wasn't. So I don't do it for that
gotcha.
reason, because I don't want to breach someone's trust or break their confidence. So for that reason, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't
Okay.
speak to them individually. Yeah.
See, that's why you're on the show because that's something that I wouldn't have thought of, but it makes
Yeah.
complete sense when you sell it, when you say it.
And then I think that I would just be like the person that they complain to. And that wouldn't be so good for me.
Yeah, yeah, fair point, fair point. All right, this is really interesting to me. I'm fascinated by this. I was on your site
Mhm.
and I was just clicking through like I do because I was curious. And I got to the testimonials,
Yeah.
and there was this one guy, God bless him. And I want to get this right. This guy said that you inspired him to join the gym and he lost weight, amongst other things. Okay. So
Mhm.
in your coaching, are you and do you get to cases? And I know what you're going to say, but it's still funny for me to ask the question. Are you getting the cases where you're like telling dudes, all right, you fat bastard, you need to lose 58 pounds? It's like, because it sounds like you changed this dude's life.
Yeah. So I know exactly who you're talking about. And the truth is, when we're not feeling confident about dating or being in relationships, it's often because we're not feeling good about ourselves as a whole. Right. So I often work with clients to look at like the big picture, like what's actually happening in your life. Are you feeling connected? Do you feel good about your body? Or like, how are your basic habits? Are you sleeping, eating well? Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you ain't ready to be dating. So we often have to address things before we even talk about the dating or getting out there and opening ourselves up to meeting somebody else. And the truth is, like, if you don't love yourself and you're not satisfied with your life as a single individual, you're not going to cut it with somebody else, right? So a lot of the times we're doing work in lots of different areas. I don't even know how much that guy weighed before. He just wanted to feel better about himself. So, going to the gym was part of like getting his health in order. And I fully encourage that, because we know there's so many health benefits of actually working out, and it makes us feel better about ourselves, it gives us more energy and all these things. And we want to be our best selves when we're going out there meeting people. So yeah, often men come to me saying I'm struggling with dating, and then I actually start asking them questions about their whole life, and we realize that there's maybe more areas to be spending time on outside of just dating.
Yeah. And I'm imagining that I get what you're saying about asking the questions and kind
Mhm.
of politely leading them in a certain area. But I'm imagining also that there are times when you're talking to someone and there's like a glaring um, hole or
Mhm.
bad spot or something, and you kind of have to be a little bit more direct. It's like, how hard are those conversations because
Yeah.
their esteem is already in a bad place. You don't want to crush them further. How do you
No, of
navigate
course
that
not.
water?
I guess for me, like my style is a little yin and yang. Like they come to me because I give them that empathy and that compassion, but I also am that solution focused mind. And so I am pushing them, and I do call men out on their BS. So they are coming to me to be, cared for and looked after, but they're also coming to me because I am going to hold them responsible to what is necessary for them to move forward. And that's maybe why people enjoy the coaching element more so than the counseling element,
Mm.
right? Because I'm also very solution focused, very action driven. And we have that accountability check in with each other. So sometimes I just have to say, what are you saying? Or I have to interrupt them midway through a sentence and go, like, I don't know where you're going with this, but can you hear what you're saying about yourself? Right. So they get a little of that tough love too.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. And I'm jumping around. I want to jump back to the
Mhm.
podcast because there was another episode I listened to, and I remember I wrote this down. You said that men should approach women with a quote unquote reasonable expectation.
Yes.
I didn't really know how to take that. It was like, okay, if you
Uh-huh.
are not the most societally attractive human being, does that mean that you should not go up to a Rihanna or someone like that? When we're
No.
talking about expectations, or are we talking about, okay, if you meet a woman and you ask her out, should you not project that into the future, into marriage? Like, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is a lot of men are afraid of rejection, so they don't go talk to women at all. And what I'm saying about having a reasonable expectations is know that there are some women that are going to respond well and some that won't. There are going to be some women that you walk up to and say, hey, I find you really fly, or I find you really beautiful. I'd love to grab your number. And they're going to say, I'm married, or I don't like men. Like, so have this reasonable expectation that it's not going to be the absolute worst experience all the time. And it's not going to be the absolute best experience all the time. It's having like the growth mindset, the positive, realistic mindset about what your dating experience is actually going to be like. It is not all rainbows and sparkles. Not every woman is going to look at you and be like, I am so glad you walked over to me. Like, my world has changed, right? Some of them are going to be in a bad mood. Like, so just know that it's not always about you. It sometimes is a reflection of what's going on in that person's day. So be realistic about it so that you don't set yourself up for feeling crappy about the experience. That's what I'm saying there.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes more sense. It's like, don't be crushed. You'll
Yeah.
live if she says no, because you never know what she might be going through. It might
Yeah.
be you, but there's a good chance that it might not.
Exactly. It might be you. The truth is, you might walk up to someone and they look at you and they go, they're totally not my person. And in that case, no problem. Like, why do you want to chase someone that's not interested in you anyways? So rejection, in my mind, the way I view it is time saving. Someone rejects you, they're saving you time.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I always wonder, transition into my next question. Always wonder, like with therapists, for example, in your case, you're a coach. Always wonder how easy, if it is easy, to kind of leave that hat off when you go home. And in your case, when you're dealing
Mm,
with Andrew, do you
yeah,
find yourself kind of coaching him, or kind of subconsciously or consciously? And
totally.
if you do, does he pick up on it?
Oh yeah, he's very smart. We're both like very, very empathetic, sensitive people. So we've had the conversation where he goes, I just want my girlfriend right now. I don't want Coach Kimberly. Right. So he knows to be direct if I'm going off path, but I also know to show up like the real me, not like the version of me that's sitting down ready to coach somebody. So am I perfect? Definitely not. Do we have a way to communicate with each other if I'm going off tangent? Absolutely. And have I caught myself like 100,000 times? Yes, absolutely. What I've recognized in myself, and one of the patterns I had in previous relationships, was that I am a fixer, that I don't want to see people in pain, that I want to support them and help them. But I recognize that that's not always my job in every situation. So there's times where I need to sit with my partner's discomfort, or to just validate what they're saying and not go into the problem solving mode. The truth is, most arguments, not most, but a lot of arguments between couples, are happening because of miscommunication, right? The man wants to take away his wife's pain by saying, well, if you just did this, it wouldn't happen. And she's going, well, that's not what I'm trying to tell you. What I really want you to do, and she's never going to say this, what I really want you to do is just listen and empathize and give me a hug. Right? She goes, that's not what I'm saying. I know how to solve the problem myself. And he's like, why don't you just do it this way? And emotion is crashing with intellect, right? When someone is showing you emotion, they're oftentimes wanting that emotion back, right? So a good way is, hey, Andrew, do you want me to just listen to you, or do you want me to help you problem solve? Is always
Okay.
good. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's cool. That's cool. Okay, so let me wrap up with this. You have interacted with a lot of men,
Mm-hmm.
on a platonic level, so you really get to see what we're like, who we are, what we're about.
Yeah.
And in that, you've also dated us as well. So you've
Mm-hmm.
gotten to see the other side of it. I mean, part of it might be in your ebook, but can you give me like a sense in all of your interactions with men on whatever level? What are we doing wrong? How are we fucking it up? Like, what could we be doing better? What do we need to stop doing when it comes to dating, relationships, whatever it is? Enlighten me, Kimberly.
You don't value yourselves enough.
Oh, wow. Wasn't expecting that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. So there's this idea of like, I'm so afraid of rejection from women because for some reason men are placing women on a pedestal above them in terms of value. Um, I think the second thing as well is like learning to really enjoy yourself and your passions. Like often men are disregarding the things they want to try and fit into the mold of what they think a woman wants them to be. But the truth is women are really attracted to men that are like very driven and have their own passions, literally, whether that's riding a bike, if that's your passion, or running a podcast, whatever it is, just do it and do it well. And that's what we're really attracted to. Like women are going to test you all the time and say, oh, spend time with me, don't do the thing that you like doing. And as soon as you do that, she will get bored with you. Like women unconsciously are testing men. They don't really realize it, right? But they're doing it. So men are not valuing themselves enough and they're trying to fit into a mold of what women want all the time. And that doesn't work out in the long run. Maybe it gets you the woman in the beginning, but over time she's like, who is this guy? This isn't the guy I was dating. So
Yeah. And I
yeah.
think to add to that, it's one of the things that we do inevitably is in our pursuit oftentimes of a woman, we might kind of overshoot. We might do a little bit more than we would normally do in a relationship.
Mhm.
And it's unfair to those women because in a sense, we get them accustomed
Yeah.
to that. And that's not really us. And so then when it's time to kind of dial it back, we don't want to dial it back, but it makes us feel bad for continuing to do these
Yeah.
things. And so it's just kind of like a catch 22. It's like we feel
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
yeah, it's like if we're ourselves and from the beginning, she might not be into us. So we have to like overshoot. And yeah, we just
It's
left.
tough for sure. With both people in the beginning are putting in way more effort. And that's the reason why a lot of relationships feel lower levels of satisfaction because we stop putting in the same amount of effort we did in the beginning. So we don't want to love bomb, which is in the beginning of dating someone, you're doing absolutely everything nice for them all the time just so that you're loved by them, right? That's love bombing and that's not a healthy thing. We want to put effort in, we want to make time for the other person, but keep it like that's why there's boundaries with dating. You want to keep it realistic so that you're not 100% and then all of a sudden you drop to 20 and your tank is empty and you just don't even know how to be in a relationship because it's too much work. So yeah, I don't know, reasonable expectations, people. No.
Okay. And for all of you guys out there that are going through that or experiencing that, that's why we have Kimberly here, KimberlyNinaHill.com. She has a package for you. Check her out. She's good at what she does. She knows stuff about guys, which is weird, but she does. And she coaches them. And you see that she won't be yelling at you and stuff like that. And she might inspire you to like go to the gym more. So
Mhm.
yeah, give Kimberly a shot. And also listen to the Self-Confidence Project. See, in your honor. Um, yeah, and get some good tips there. Get her ebook. Kimberly, you're cool as can be. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it, like genuinely I did.
Yeah. Well, I would hope so.
Well, I could have lied, but no, it's true. I really enjoyed this last however long, 45 minutes or so, just chatting with you. It kind of just feels like sitting here chatting with a friend. So that's nice.
Cool, because we are friends now. So
Mhm.
there you
Yeah,
go. Yep.
we are.
Yep. So I will put all of Kimberly's information in the show notes if you all want to reach out to her, if you have any questions and you want to reach out to me for whatever reason and want me to pass them along, that'd be odd, but hey, I'll do that too. I'll do whatever you all need to do. As long as you tell 50 friends to tell 50 friends to listen to this podcast. It's what I say every week and continue to do it. And for Kimberly, because like I always say to our guests when they come on the show, I don't want anybody to be bigger than me. So you can tell 40 friends to tell 40 friends to listen to Kimberly's podcast, the Self-Confidence Project. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thanks again, Kimberly. Reggie, you want to say bye? No, Reggie doesn't have anything to say. So I'll say goodbye on his behalf. Bye. And thank you, Kimberly.
Ciao.